Hello, everybody. It's good to see you this afternoon. I hope everyone is well. My special guest today is Trisha Jensen, and I'm excited about having the opportunity to interview her. I am sitting here looking outside at 70-degree weather, and so that is something that is rare, and it's nice. So we've got an exciting interview today. She is also a life coach, very well educated, and has a unique perspective on things when it comes to religious trauma and healing and working with people that are in between and deciding, what to believe. And so that is something that I'm looking forward to talking to her about. Other than that, for those that don't know me, I am Brad. I am a life coach, and I help people that are deconstructing, going through religious trauma, and also relationship issues caused by that deconstructing. So if you ever need anybody to talk to, I'd be more than happy to talk to you. Outside of that, we're just going to wait for a second for her to log on and you request to join. I don't see that she's logged on just yet, but she should be shortly. I hope everybody's doing well today. How's everybody doing today? I see, hi Becca. Good to see you. And then J.I., how are you doing today? I hope you are having a good day as well. So we're just going to pause for a second and let her log on, and I'm going to light my pipe and get ready to ask a bunch of questions, hopefully. So, anyways, for those that may not know it, I do a fair amount of lives, and so you can go and find my other lives and different variety of people that I interview. I create a safe space for people to talk so that they do not feel threatened, and so they can get their story across. You're doing okay working. You finally catching a live stream. Has it been difficult for you to catch a live stream? Hi, Trisha. Trisha is just logged on. I'll wait for her to join. There we go. She sent the request. She'll be popping up here any second.
There we go.
Hi, Trisha. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there.
Thanks for having me on.
Was it confusing getting on?
No, I've just never joined anyone before.
Gotcha. I got it. I've interviewed a lot of people that it's their first time, and it's difficult for them to figure out how to do it. I didn't know how to do it until somebody taught me. So
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I'm glad to be on.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. So I've just been kind of introducing myself. I wanted to give you a moment. Why don't you take a moment, just introduce yourself to the people that are watching this now, and we'll watch it later.
Okay. My name is Trisha Jensen. I work with Dr. Julie Hanks. I'm a life coach, and I primarily work with Mormons and ex-Mormons and mixed belief families of Mormons. And all the deconstructing that goes along with leaving the Mormon church or being on a faith journey and trying to stay in the Mormon church.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What is your religious background?
So I grew up, a true believing Mormon is going to want me to say, I grew up going to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They like to use their full name. And I grew up in a really Orthodox home that was like firm, all in believers. Yeah.
Wow. So, when you say you grew up, how long were you? I mean, was it up into college? Like, what was your,
No, up until I was like in my early 40s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
for my whole life.
Yeah. Well, okay. And so you've experienced the full gamut of Mormonism, basically, and everything that they have to offer. Jesus
Hmm.
Christ, Latter-day Saints.
Hmm.
And what was the breaking point or breaking points between you and this religion?
Well, my husband had been through a faith journey previous to me. So he was kind of like moving out of the church, and I was still all in, and my kids were still all in with me. And I mean, to be the total breaking point for me was there was a couple different times where the church took the side of a perpetrator instead of the victim. They backed the perpetrator instead of the victim, which was really hard for me to see them like back someone who is doing harm to someone else. And so then that was probably the catalyst of like when I was like, how far into this can I be? There's so much I love about it, but then I just feel like I'm on the wrong side here. Like I want to be an advocate for, the weaker, the marginalized, just like, I was grown up to believe that that's what the Savior did, and that's what I wanted to be. So that was probably the starting point for me.
So Becca chimed in. She's a former TBM too,
Hi, Becca.
as well. So that being the case, you said that was the final breaking point. Were there other cracks that you noticed along the way that you kind of
Oh,
questioned?
yeah. I mean, I'd always struggled with polygamy, right? And I'm definitely like I mean, I was like a closet feminist because we grew up in the patriarchy. And so being a feminist meant that you were anti-children, anti-husband. In still love being a mom, and I still have a husband. Like you can't be all three. And but the church is very much set up in a patriarchy, and women just don't. I mean, they matter, and they'll be told that they matter over and over and over again, but at the end of the day, no woman has any voice in the church, and the buck always stops at a man. So there's really no power for a woman. I mean, all day long you'll hear about the power that women have in the church, but there really isn't. It's
No.
the power can have children, and it's like, well, yeah, but that's not power in the church. That's power for all women. We're able to have children as female, right? So, yeah.
So how long did if you don't mind me asking, how long did your husband um, leave or deconstruct before you did?
So his deconstruction was really long because I think he wanted to stay in so bad for me because I love so much about the church. And I still love so much about the church. There's things that I'm like, I think it's like when you're born into a high demand religion, any high demand religion, it's like woven into your being. And so you identify as that your whole life, whether or not you're a part of it or not. It's so much a part of who you were growing up and how you became who you are, that it's to me it's like almost like my blonde hair, right? It's just part of me. So there's parts that I will always love, but he was deconstructing because he was so scared. A lot of people who deconstruct and their spouse doesn't, it'll end up breaking up the marriage because it's such a high demand religion. And so I think that he was really afraid of losing our marriage over it, which is that's one of the reasons I got into life coaching, is because it's true that too many marriages are lost over faith or differences, and that doesn't feel good.
No, I totally agree. I also understand totally what you mean by the identity.
Yeah.
Uh, that was my identity for, I don't know, 40 years.
Yep.
So, I mean, you want to hang on to it to a certain point, but then obviously the breaking points come, and I mean, you choose family or you choose the religion or whatever have you. So,
Yeah.
like I chose my kids, right? So, over religion. So I get that. So you became a life coach. When did you decide to become a life coach?
I've been coaching now well, I was nutrition coaching previous to life coaching because I'm a nutritionist as well. And I do love the whole in deconstructing the mind body connection, and the highway that goes from the mind and body is so important in deconstructing, is taking care of yourself, mind and body. So it was, I think, as I was going, my husband had been through his faith journey. I was going through my faith journey, and I just felt so much pain in that community that I thought, this is where I need to be coaching. And I started steering further away from just nutrition and more into life coaching.
So,
yeah.
What is one of the greatest joys that you find life coaching?
Honestly, one of my favorite things is seeing people realize that they don't have to lose a relationship over deconstruction, that being on different sides of it, that you can still find common values and that you're still who you are. I think one of the fears of like deconstruction is, well, who are you now? And how do I trust you? And you're not the same person. And it's just a very scary thing. And once you recognize, oh, you're still you and I'm still me, and we can still have a relationship. And guess what? Our values are not that different. It's just that I'm using different verbiage. Instead of using the verbiage of the Spirit told me to, or God told me to, it's like, I really believe in helping people. I really believe in honesty. I wasn't told to be honest. That's a core value I believe in. Right.
Right. So you can have morals even outside of religion then as well.
Yeah. It's shocking, but yes, people can have.
Well, because I was always taught, growing up in a conservative Southern Baptist mentality, that you cannot have morals outside of religion.
Yeah. Oh, and we were taught to be, kind, but leery of those outside of our, faith, because it was threatening. And I think that threat is what pulls relationships apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: what, because you're a special needs area, what is religious trauma? What's your definition of it?
Well, so first of all, I do believe that everyone has trauma, whether religious or any other. Like, part of the human experience is learning to cope with traumatic experiences. So, I mean, even from birth, right? The birthing experience is very traumatic for a mother and possibly the child. Like, you just don't know. Like, trauma is part of life. So I think sometimes the word trauma gets a bad note and label, but because it's just part of the human experience, right?
Right.
I think the problem with religious trauma is that in religious trauma, it's God is hailed for everything good that happens, and you are terrible if anything bad happens. Things that happen bad are because of you. Things that happen good are because of God. Or if it's because of God that something bad happens to you, it's because you did something to deserve it. So I think that learning to cope with, like, trying to make your higher being happy with you is traumatic. Is traumatic because your thoughts around it and how you see yourself, and then the shame and the everything that goes along with it is just very traumatic.
Yeah, never being able to live up to the standard that's set out in front, right? So I totally agree with that about religious trauma. You and I, when we had talked, had mentioned about how you like to work in the gray areas.
Yeah.
Call them. Take us through that. What does that mean, the gray areas?
So there is a term that some people know, but it's called a cafeteria Christian or cafeteria Mormon. And it's basically the idea that you walk into, the religion, and you take what you love, and then you don't participate in the things you don't love, right? But if you're in a high demand religion, it is difficult to do this cafeteria style worship because you're not really part of the group. So you're a little bit scary and you're not really out of the group. And so you're too in for those that are out. You're too out for those that are in. I get a lot of like hate mail because I'm not taking a side enough. But the truth is like, I had a beautiful childhood. I raised my children in this religion. I mean, there are a lot worse things you can be than a Christian or a Mormon, right? Like there's a lot worse you could do. So I'm not like anti, right? But I'm also not okay with an organization taking all the calls, making all the calls for you and deciding what's right and wrong, even when it's things that you feel are wrong. Okay. So like an example of that is I did a post yesterday about the LGBTQ community within Christianity. And I got some love of like, good job. We're happy about that, you know, but I got a ton of comments that were like haters.
Really?
Yeah. Like, why not just let pedophiles sit on the pew and, you know, Satanists and all the, you're going to open the door to LGBTQ, which I refrained from answering because I was like, well, pedophiles do sit on the pews. You just don't know it. Or, you know what I mean? Those things do happen. It's just, my point is that, you know, people should be able to worship. There should be a place for everyone to find like, you know, balance, peace, connection, whatever they want. And you should be able to open the door. Now in the Mormon faith, it's like, we love the sinner, hate the sin. Right.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we love them, but they can't really be a part of us. You know, my problem with that is I've known too many good people, LGBTQ in the community, just good people that would love to participate, but aren't allowed. And they're not doing, I mean, in my mind, they're not sinning. They're in a monogamous family relationship, you know, like, and so for me, I can't get on board with that. So that in the cafeteria style, I'm like, I can't go there. Right. But in that viewpoint, I'm also, you know, not quite Mormon enough.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. You're not black or white. You're gray.
Right. Yeah. And it is in the gray. Only in the gray will you find a connection on both sides.
Yeah.
So I love the gray, even though people tend to hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love gray as well. So it happens to be my favorite color. So, right.
Yeah.
So you deal with, or you really help people kind of walk through and hopefully mend relationships if they come from different backgrounds or are different places in their belief system. I hope it's okay to ask, but what are some possible methods, or like how do you approach something like that?
Well, so in the Mormon community, there's a lot of like verbiage that as you're going through deconstruction can be really triggering. And it's specific to the Mormon faith. It's like their own language. And it's English, but it means something different. So like, for example, I saw that we had a true believing Mormon on here, so I'll go. But for example, like a tender mercy, that's like, oh, that was a tender mercy. And that comes from a talk given by an apostle who talked about tender mercies. And it kind of like went, you know, viral in the Mormon community where it became this staple, you know, phrase that people would say, oh, and it was a tender mercy, you know, or, and so there are like, or even stake, ward, instead of congregation, neighbors. It's like
when you say tender mercy, what is that referring to? Just so I get the full gist, because I being a ex Southern Baptist, you know, I hear like, you know, love the sinner, hate the sin, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What does tender mercy mean in the TBM?
Tender mercy just means that you didn't really see it coming, or it maybe wasn't what you thought it was going to be. And then in the end, it ended up being so great. So it was like a tender mercy. Like you didn't know, you know, you walk into the chapel and the song that was at, you know, last time you saw your dad is playing, and you feel this tender mercy that God is saying, you walked into the chapel. It becomes about you, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So you have these like phrases that come up all the time. And the problem is that when you're deconstructing and you're kind of like, you're like, this is not normal language. Why do we have to speak in this, word of wisdom, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people have heard of the word of wisdom. That's something that comes up all the time. It's like, you can have tea if it's herbal tea, but that's only if you're probably a gray member. You're not supposed to have coffee. You're not supposed to smoke. You're not supposed to drink, or all of these things. And yet, like, Mormons are like sugar addicts. There's like cookie stands everywhere. They drink Diet Coke by the gallons there. You know what I mean? So you have like these like really
Right.
strong, these other vices. And so I think when you're going through deconstruction, some of that gets really triggering because you're like, you're over here judging me for my cup of coffee, but you've had like 2 gallons of Diet Coke this morning, and so it becomes kind of triggering. So a lot of it, one of the things I do a lot of is just like dumbing down the language so that you start understanding value system instead of language of religion. So, which values have nothing to do with religion or anything. Like this is like atheist to like true believing Mormon can use the same system of values, and in that start coming together instead of having the star belly sneeches and the bear belly sneeches. All of a sudden, you're coming together and like, well, yeah, but we actually are all sneeches, right? Like, I mean, it goes right back to that whole like childhood book of, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's great because I can relate, and I'm sure a lot of people that follow you or me can relate to the fact that religions, no matter what it is, they have their own language.
Yeah.
Right? All these
Yeah.
code for things, to where if you go out into society and you speak to somebody that's never grown up in religion, they look at you like, "What in the world are you talking about?" Right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
like, are you nuts? Right?
Yeah.
So being washed in the blood, what in the world?
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? So, and the way that the translation happens. But so if somebody is going through this process of deconstructing and they have a partner, a married partner, whoever it may be, a relationship, or they're not quite on board and they're different, and where they stand on their beliefs, what's a piece of advice that you would give them as they go through this?
Well, okay. So first of all, I think sometimes, I used to look at it from just one vantage point, and now I've seen enough that I've got multiple vantage points. But I used to look at it as like, oh, the person who's in the church is so great to stay with the person who's left the church, right? Like, oh, what a martyr. Like they just have taken the high road to stay with the heathen or whatever it is, right? Not understanding that, the person who has left the church may not want to be with someone who listens first and foremost to an organization before they listen to their spouse. And so in that, like you both have to be committed at wanting to make this work. And if you are a true Orthodox member, it's hard because in that, the Mormon church has temples where you're sealed to each other for eternity, right? You become married for eternity. But if you're not both living the values and commandments and active in the church, then that sealing can be broken and you wouldn't necessarily be with that person forever. So sticking it out with someone who's not in, like, well, I'm choosing to be alone in the eternities, at least in thought, right? So you both have to come together a little bit gray, or it can't, because you have to get to a point where you start to believe in a more merciful God, right? Because you're going to be in a religious home. If your mixed belief is going to be a religious home, you don't go atheist. So most of the people I work with still are in religious homes because they're not going to go full atheist, because at the end of the day, one of them truly believes in the afterlife and living in heaven with God, right? And the rules that come along with that through the faith. And there are some pretty stringent rules in the Mormon faith, right? And so you have to start, I always say, I mean, and this is highly offensive to a true believing Mormon, so I totally recognize that. But I always say Mormon God can be kind of an ass, right? Because he's like breaking up families. He's like my way or the highway. He's punishing you. He's shame. He's jealous. He's, you know, all of the things that we read about, those like human traits that we're here to like overcome on earth. Apparently God still has. He has all of those crappy traits that we're here to overcome, right? And so you start to think like, well, who do I believe in? Like, what do I actually believe in? Who is that God that I'm going to believe in? And typically it's going to be a little bit different than the like really strict Mormon God. It's going to be a more merciful, kind, gentle, generous God. And so you get to a point where you're like, well, and I always tell people, who are you as a parent? And how much mercy do you show your kids? Chances are the God that you want to believe in will be more merciful than you, right? But it is a trick, because that feels very blasphemous when you have had the hellfire and brimstone that comes with, you know. And I know a lot of true believing Mormons would like roll their eyes at me and say, that's not the God that I grew up with. Like, that is not, you're so wrong. That is not. But I will say Mormon God has started to change, and he's becoming more merciful. As we learn, like when I talk to my kids about God, you know, who they're learning about versus who I learned about in church are a little different. The God that I grew up with was a little more strict.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah.
I went to your webpage, and I, first of all, I love that you're with a group of people, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so, what do you like for those that are thinking, hey, I would love to talk to you about what's going on in my life and everything that what do you offer, and how can they find and follow you?
So I help with deconstruction, which is, you know, because that's what you do, that there's just a lot of layers that go into this, into the healing of it, understanding who you are, how you actually believe. I do a lot of like meditation, breath work, mind body connection, as well as just I always have like homework things to work on to start to like tap into like who you actually are. What do you actually like? I mean, it's silly, but it's, a lot of people give so much they don't even know, like, well, wait, like I don't know, like what do I like? What music do I actually like? Like what do I like to eat? How do I, you know, getting to know yourself basically. It's kind of shock. I'm sure you see tons of that.
Yeah, it's amazing, because you're right. Religion literally goes into every aspect of your life. And so when you pull away or you're trying to figure yourself out, I mean, I went through a time of saying, hey, do I really like this or do I like that? I mean, because
Yeah.
I've been taught this. Do I really want, you know? So, yeah.
Well, and statistically, I think a lot of people that deconstruct end up atheist. Would you agree?
Actually, it's interesting because I think they may start out that way because they're bitter and angry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they just want nothing to do with anything spirituality wise. But I'm finding that the majority of people that I've talked to that are ex-evangelical actually kind of, when that pans out, when they get done deconstructing, that there is some sort of spiritual element,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not as defined.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in Mormonism, a lot of people go atheist
Yeah.
initially because if this isn't true, well, and we're taught that it's the one true church, the one way back to God. So if it's not the one way, then it's all a farce.
All farce, right?
Yeah. So it's like, you know, you take off the blinders and all of a sudden it's, but I do, you know, so one thing I work on is in every religion, I believe, even in atheism, there's common ground and common beliefs. you know? And so as you start to, you know, deconstruct and figure out like what, I have a whole like homework program where I go through different like values and what that value even means. And you start to like taper down and understand like what is the most important thing to me. And it's interesting because people really wrestle with it because they don't even really know. They wrestle with what their core values are. But then once you start to recognize this is really a core value, like say family is a core value, or honesty is a core value, or diversity is a core value. Like once you have one of those that you really start to believe in, you start to notice how that does define a lot of your choices, because the value you really care about, you know, and that in that you can start to move forward into like, I may not be doing this for a religion, but whether it's energy, Mother Earth, higher power, God, whatever you want to call it, even just value system, like you believe in something. Everyone believes in something. Right. So that's kind of where I start. And I really work on, if there's any way to save a family, family is one of my core values. So it's hard for me not to fight for the family. And it's really sad to me when something that's supposed to make families stronger can also pull families apart. So I try really hard. If there's a way to save the family, I always work at, and if there's not a way to save the family, I work at having a very, you know, happy medium of like, because usually you're going to be stuck in each other's lives forever, even if it doesn't, if it's not right to stay together, finding a way to make it work with not being together, you know?
Yes. I really love the fact that you go that in depth with the values of individuals, people, and you kind of marry those together in the gray area, right? Yeah. How that goes. So that's awesome. So if people were to follow you, how can they follow you? Like, what do you have coming up? Where do they go to find your information?
So I work with Dr. Julie Hanks. So I'm on her website with drjuliehanks.com/coaching. And then I usually do a post or two on Instagram. I have like a Thursday thought, and I'll do, you know, triggering posts that sometimes, you know, have been hurtful. I've had, you know, I have 2 sons that are all in on the church. They're still very, very active in the church. And I have had, you know, phone calls, Mom, you have to take that down. That is, and
wow.
And I always respect, if that's too triggering for them, then I always respect that, because the truth is, you know, I love too many people that are still super active. You know, I have a twin sister that's super active. I have my parents, like there's a lot of people I really love that are super active, and we all still have a ton in common and a lot of values in common. So I don't want to like push people over the edge, but I do post a little bit of triggering things because I'm trying to like nudge you into thoughts. Mm-hmm. So if you're offended, then that might be the point. No. You're supposed to be thinking, why am I offended by this?
The whole reason for the post.
Yeah. But it doesn't always go over, but that's the reason for the post. Yes.
So, and kind of wrapping up, tell us something fun about yourself. Like, you have a hobby you like? Is there a favorite movie? Tell us something that comes to mind.
So I really am, at the end of the day, I am a nature lover. So I live right on the base of the mountains, and I hike probably 3 or 4 times a week, and just love being in nature. And I also, that's part of the mind body connection. It's just like connecting with nature. I have a lot of spiritual, to be honest, like I feel like I'm still a very highly spiritual person, and it is in nature that I feel like most connected to my spirituality. And so that's kind of a big part of my husband and I. We've walked or run for like 25 years, and it's just always been a really good thing for our relationship. And I love it. So that's kind of my jam.
Awesome.
One of these days I'll start like a hiking club where we all go and musings in the mountains or something. I do love getting to know you, though, because it's super interesting to me how much we have in common coming from such different places. Because growing up as a true believing Mormon, I have always heard how much Baptists hate Mormons. So I'm just grateful that we can be friends.
Let me see. I was taught from a very young age that you're a cult, and that you dissuade people from seeing the truth, and that they're not going to heaven, and their writings are fallacies, basically. So, yeah, there's no love. Actually, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll put it what it is. Evangelical. Let's just call this the Southern Baptist Convention. Believes everyone else is wrong.
Yeah.
And I find that most religions do that, right? They think that everyone else is wrong but them.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
But there is a strange rivalry between the Mormons and the Baptists.
oh yeah,
Because we don't have those talks about the Jews and the Muslims. Like, it's the Baptists.
but yeah. We talk.
I don't know what happened way back when, but something went amiss.
Yeah, somebody got somebody and boom, it was on, right? So
right.
Yeah, it it is terrible.
Yeah.
To have the hatred between the two, right?
And yet the deconstruction seems very similar.
Oh, it is.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because they sometimes, I think, use the same systems, or have the same systems in place that grab the young and mold the minds. At least I can speak as an ex-Southern Baptist that they have a particular way of doing things so that children grow up at least till they're 18. And their brains are wired a certain way, like with purity culture and everything like that, to where it's very difficult for them to get out at times. The shame, the guilt,
Mm-hmm.
everything on those lines. It's really, really difficult. And then they don't even realize how much religion, or Southern Baptist religion, however you want to call it, is steeped in everything they do and everything they look at, right? So there are a lot of similarities with that.
Yeah.
But we can be friends.
Yeah. We'll break the mold.
What? You're a friend of Mormon? So I left. I mean, I lost all but two people, and that's from 25 years of ministry. I mean, Southern Baptists are pretty hardcore, saying, "Hey, we don't want to know why. We just figure you're leaving because you're sinning, right? Or the devil's got you, whatever have you." So,
well, and I think that's one of the misconstrued ideas is that people leave to sin.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Even though you can sin and be part of it.
Yeah. Hey, so I want to lose all of my friends and some family members. Because it's been so worth it, right? When you're right, you can ask for forgiveness when you're there. Yeah, I mean, it's just, there's all kinds of things. I thought it was funny. There was a comment here says it's like how Lutherans feel and talk about Catholics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
They're almost too similar or something that they hate each other.
Yeah. There's animosity everywhere, right? So.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I want to thank you so much, Trisha, because
thank you for reaching out.
Shed light on a lot of questions about TB&M, and what the church has, and I love the fact that you really know what you're talking about and you're living it because you have kids that are still in it, right? And and you've seen your husband deconstruct, and you have gone through that, and your training and everything. And so I thank you for coming on here and sharing your knowledge and wisdom. For anybody that's going through any kind of religious trauma, although you gave a great definition about trauma as well. If you missed that, go back earlier and listen to what she said. Or is deconstructing with religion, period, especially if you're a Mormon, or I'm sorry, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I like using their full name, right? So,
right.
Whatever it may be.
We've been super offensive. We keep saying Mormon. That's true.
I know it's super offensive, right? But I'm ex-Southern on now. So I'm supposed to be offensive, right? So,
yeah. That's right.
Please go to her page, Trisha Jensen.coaching. You follow her. I'm going to put her link in the box underneath when I post this video. And then in your info box it has the link to your website. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, your profile. Okay, I'm definitely go and look her up and talk to her. She has taught me a lot just having brief conversations with her. So thank you very much, Trisha. I appreciate you.
Well, likewise. So we'll link each other up.
That sounds good. All right. I hope you have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Hey, everybody.
Bye.